Let's get some analysis now. With me, David Gazzard from DPG Advisory and Ben Oquist, Executive Director of the Australia Institute. Gents, great to see you both. How important is it to get the leaders in the same room? Because we've seen, as I spoke to the Foreign Minister, consensus emerging when it comes to China, a shift, I think, in the position of certainly NATO, but the G7 also strong in supporting Joe Biden's position when it comes to China, which also, of course, provides ballast to our government's position.
You get the feeling that, having that personal contact was just highly determinant in the end about getting some deals over the line. I mean, clearly the PM Morrison here and his counterpart in the UK thrashing out the details late into the night about the free trade agreement that is going to be so beneficial to our economy and to theirs. You can't do that over Zoom. Getting them together with a meal, talking, the rapport, rekindling the friendships and the relationships, finding out the nuances and where they see things, utterly important. And Zoom's got us a long way, but it probably is not going to get us that far, right?
I couldn't agree more. I think that when you're talking about, because having covered many of these summits and so on, we talk about the rapport between leaders, and sometimes it can be the thing, a pull aside on the formal talks where you might resolve some tension. So David rightly pointing to what happens between friends, but also when you've got someone where there's some tension in that bilateral relationship, sometimes those informal discussions can also ease those. These face-to-face meetings are crucial.
Yeah, absolutely. And I wrote about this on the weekend, that Morrison was copping some flack for travelling overseas, and it's a reflexive view by some. It gets you a cheap headline to attack politicians for travelling overseas, but I said it was a good thing. Our politicians need to travel more, not less, and nothing substitutes for face-to-face. And I think particularly for a middle power like Australia, the benefits from a rules-based order, it's more important for us than big countries. I think Morrison has done himself a disservice in the past, and he carries a fair bit of baggage from his negative globalism and siding up with Trump in the past. Now he's in there calling for a rule-based order. Now he's calling for the World Trade Organization to have more authority, not less, when previously he's kind of railed. I think what everybody now agrees is one of his worst speeches, where he railed against negative globalism. And I think that probably makes it trickier for him, and trickier for him to bring the Australian public on side. Foreign policy is one of those things policy areas that needs the most leadership, because it's too easy for the public to kind of revert to parochialism or nationalism, and not like other countries where, of course, diplomacy and foreign engagement involves working with other countries, not against them.
Well, when you speak about that speech, it was in the context of a Trump presidency who, as I put it to the Foreign Minister, Donald Trump really wasn't a great believer in alliances. Certainly not NATO, certainly not, he was critical of the Japanese relationship over many, many years. It was Australia, Joe Hockey, that did a great job in trying to impress upon him the importance of our alliance. But Biden's a totally different kettle of fish. He is a traditionalist who backs these traditional alliances.
I think, the unilateral approach that Donald Trump took, we almost had to cop, because in trade terms, they had the whip hand over us. But they're still our greatest security partner, so we worked in with that. I think, I disagree with Ben's point more broadly, and I would say you look at what Scott Morrison has done on the world stage, literally with the G7 and other invited guests, and he's put the whole question of regional security, sovereignty, the probe into the causes of the virus in the first place, that has really been cemented in. The fact that he was invited there was quite important. I think he's been the forerunner on a whole range of issues that now Western liberal democracies are taking up.
Assisted
with
by
more
a president
who
is of a similar view.
Correct, and has had hawkish views on this region for some time, going right back to his previous days in a whole range of different portfolios in the US. So this is quite consistent for him. But I think this is the other thing that surprised everyone is how well, all the predictions were that we were going to be isolated. Far from it. We've actually worked really well together.
Well, yeah, I mean, credit to Marise Payne in terms of that, some of the positions she's taken. I still am of the view that I think, having coalescing allies before you jump out and make some of those calls is probably a smarter way, but she doesn't want to say she's been vindicated, but the G7's saying they want another study in terms of the origins of COVID.
Of course, we all want an inquiry. It's a question of how you get there. You have to deal with the world as you find it, not as the way you wish it to be. And Australia, as a middle power, benefits from working with other countries, as difficult as that may sometimes be. And I don't think anybody has ever argued that there shouldn't be an inquiry. What the argument was that Australia front-run it. And that caused a serious diplomatic blowback that we didn't need and a trade blowback that we didn't have to have. Now, you can all be hairy-chested and say, I caused it, but the reality is it was working with other countries that caused it, and Marise Payne should have done it with other countries first.
Ben Oquist from the Australia Institute, David Gazzard from DPG. Thanks, gents. Talk to you soon.
20% get nothing. They're really unfair tax cuts.
People want to see much stronger action from the government when it comes to climate change.
It's no coincidence that we have a wages crisis in Australia.
Transitioning to net zero emissions, it doesn't seem like there's much room for gas.